The Necrons, deathless constructs of living metal whose empire once spanned countless planets many moons ago. Long ago, they were known as the Necrontyr, a humanoid race whose very existence was that of a short lifespan and an obsession with death. Now they are but a shadow of their former selves, where the empire had long fallen, their bodies shed for that of metal and a deathless slumber that lasted for millions of years. Recently they have awoken, with their skeletal armies marching through many worlds they once held. It is unknown how many of these so-called tomb worlds actually exist, for try as they might, the Imperium and indeed many other races that inhabit the galaxy have yet to fully understand the complexities of this once ancient and proud race. Millennia have passed, and in truth, even the most competent of scholars within the Imperium have only learnt so much. Millions of years ago, long before the Imperium of Man was even a thought, let alone a reality, there stood a humanoid race known as the Necrontyr. Originally from the outer regions of the Milky Way galaxy, in a region known as the Halo Stars, this race suffered much on their home planet. Solar winds and radiation storms struck the planet at a near constant rate, and because of that, the lives of the Necrontyr were extremely short, with the extreme levels of radiation afflicting many of them with various cancers and other illnesses. The Necrontyr had grown rather accustomed to their short lifespans, and this naturally affected their culture, where their cities are stylized in the form of tombs, anticipating their soon-to-be death, rather than the life they may live. Life was merely temporary, while death was forever. The Necrontyr were obsessed with death. Their cities would be built in respect of the dead, never the living, and it was so that every Necrontyr strived for greatness so that he or she may have a grand tomb when they succumb to the many illnesses that plagued them. They would constantly work to find some sort of cure, yet unfortunately, as they were all too aware, that which was plaguing them was the very star that gave them life. If the Necrontyr were to truly survive, they needed to leave their homeworld. And it was so that many of these poor humanoids began to research on a way to search the stars above them, so that they may finally be free of that which plagued them, and perhaps form an empire that would last until the end of time. The fleet that the Necrontyr created was crude by most Imperial standards. The ships moved incredibly slow in the vast expanse of space. Self-styled status crypts were required to be fashioned aboard them, lest the Necrontyr die en route to their destination. Nonetheless, they persisted, and slowly but surely colonized many planets, so much so that a mass majority of the Milky Way galaxy was under their short but powerful control. Various Necrontyr dynasties would be founded across these many new worlds, where while still relatively independent and forming their own traditions, they still answered to a higher power, that of the Triarch. The Triarch is the ruling council that commanded the Necrontyr en masse. Three commanded this sickly but proud race. Three pharaohs whose own respective dynasties have seen them rise above all others. Of these three, there is one silent king, who only speaks through the other two pharaohs. These three positions have seen many changes due to their naturally short lifespans, where many have risen and fallen, but the end goal has always been the same: to place the whole of the Milky Way galaxy under the control of the Necrontyr. Expansion was slow but efficient, and soon enough there were no others to rival the empire of the Necrontyr. That was until they came across the beings known as the Old Ones. These ancient and mysterious beings were far older than anyone could have imagined. They were masters of technology most races at the time could not have ever imagined, but what fascinated the Necrontyr most about them was that the Old Ones had mastered the very concept of life and death itself, becoming true immortal beings. Naturally, the Necrontyr sought out the Old Ones, hoping for their aid in achieving immortality, so that they may finally be rid of their cursed short lifespans that still plagued them many years after they began their expansion. Unfortunately for them, it would seem that the Old Ones were rather uninterested in aiding the Necrontyr, and instead went about their own business, with the Old Ones colonizing planets far faster than they could have done, due to their mastery over the Immaterium, and their famed warp gates, which allowed them to travel almost instantaneously across the stars. This only fueled the Necrontyr's hatred towards them, as they believed it unfair that such a race should exist with such long lifespans while they were doomed to die. Unfortunately for the Necrontyr, the Old Ones were the least of their problems, for their empire was now spreading far and wide, and communication from the Triarch was becoming more and more difficult, as now many of the colonies were becoming more independent. As each of the dynasties grew larger, so too did the jealousy of their peers. Soon enough, the whole of the Necrontyr race was forced into a brutal civil war. This was known as the Wars of Secession, where for years the Necrontyr battled each other in bid for supremacy. And in truth, would this had continued, the whole of the race may have seen itself destroyed as dynasty launched invasion against dynasty. The Triarch needed to act quickly, lest everything that had been built be destroyed in a matter of years. They needed to turn the Necrontyr's attention away from their petty squabbles, so that they could be united once again and naturally be easier to control. The Old Ones would make a perfect target, as they were by far one of the most powerful species that the Necrontyr had ever encountered, and the already looming jealousy would provide the perfect spark for war. The Triarch would speak to its subjects, a race long divided, on how they should join in arms as they once were long ago, on how the Old Ones refused to share their secrets of immortality with them, despite the fact that they knew of the curse that ails them. If the Old Ones would not share their secrets willingly, then they will be forced to do so. And with that, the entire Necrontyr race was called to war. This sparked the event known as the War in Heaven, where the Necrontyr launched an offensive against the Old Ones with all their might, invading world after world in hopes of destroying their hated foe. Unfortunately for the Necrontyr, the Old Ones were not as weak as anticipated, and quickly retaliated against them. Their use of the webway proved to be invaluable, as they were able to launch counterattacks where the Necrontyr were at their most weakest. And soon enough, the proud Necrontyr found themselves pushed back, having to surrender many of their colonial worlds, as they found themselves being pushed back to their home world in the Halo Stars, imprisoned to suffer once again under the radiation that plagued them so long ago. There they were forced to stay, hatred brewing in their hearts for not just the Old Ones, but all intelligent life in the Milky Way galaxy. Why should they all live prosperous lives while the Necrontyr suffer and slowly die out? Why should they be forgotten? The Necrontyr were close to extinction, supplies were dwindling, and once again civil war was looming within, with what little numbers they had left. There was once again no common enemy. All were contenders to each of the great dynasties that fought for survival. Many believe the Necrontyr as a whole wished for this war, but in truth, many of the remaining dynasties wished for peace with the Old Ones, in hopes that an agreement of sorts could be reached, or at the very least that they could survive. But unfortunately the Triarch would not allow for peace, and further see the Necrontyr destroy themselves, in a bid to prevent a second war of secession. However, by not allowing peace with the Old Ones, they further pushed the other dynasties into war with each other. The entirety of the Necrontyr race had been through a brutal and bloody war, where if the Old Ones so wished, or any other race for that matter, they could have destroyed the Necrontyr without any effort. Thankfully for them, the Old Ones were otherwise occupied with a much larger threat. A threat which would present itself to the Necrontyr to be a potential ally. The C'tan. The C'tan, or Star Gods as many know them, are as ancient as creation in the Milky Way galaxy itself. Many believe they were spawned the very moment the universe came into existence, the very first self-aware creatures. They are parasites who feed on solar energies. Many now speculate that they are the reason the Necrontyr suffered so much on their homeworld, as the C'tan fed upon the star that gave the Necrontyr life, making it volatile and unstable, seeping radiation onto the poor humanoids. The C'tan loathe all forms of psychic and warp-based energies, being unable to feed upon them as they would do with other forms of energy. They were, however, interested in the Old Ones themselves, but could not act upon their hunger without a more physical aid. It was only natural that both the C'tan and the Necrontyr were rather curious about each other. The C'tan wishing to find an ally in order to defeat the Old Ones and eventually feed on them, while the Necrontyr needed assistance in general, lest their race be truly destroyed. It is truly unknown on how they made contact with each other. Such knowledge has been lost to the ages. But what is known is that many of these remaining dynasties sought favor from the C'tan, wishing to harness the power of these beings of pure energy to destroy the Old Ones. Together, they used the powerful alloy known as necrodermis, or living metal as it is more commonly known, to forge bodies for these star gods, so that they may physically walk the world. Not much is truly known about necrodermis. It is mostly described as living metal, where any damage the bearer would take would slowly begin to repair itself, where even if reduced to singular atoms, it would eventually reform and take the shape it was once forged to. Without long, these so-called star gods entered a physical form, such an ancient evil made manifest, being drawn to the power of the living metal and the possibilities it presented. The Catan rose in new form of existence, and their hunger ever grew. The Necrontyr made these wondrous bodies. Perhaps they had more uses. As more and more Catan were drawn to the Necrontyr homeworld, one rose above all others, speaking directly to the Silent King, thanking him for this new form of life and explaining that soon more of his kind will arrive. It explained that long ago, before the birth of the Necrontyr, a mighty war had been fought between the Catan and the Old Ones, a war that the Catan had lost, and now, with these new bodies, they wish for revenge. He spoke to the Silent King about an allegiance where Catan and Necrontyr would form a mighty army and destroy the Old Ones once and for all. Should he comply to the offer of not just an alliance, but also of friendship, the Catan will give the Necrontyr the knowledge of immortality they so wished. The Triarch debated this offer for months on end. Surely this is what they needed to destroy their most hated foes and finally bring unity to their fragile race. As fate would have it, it was prophesied that indeed they would defeat the Old Ones together, but it would forever doom the Necrontyr. But such prophecies were dismissed as foolish. As the Triarch felt that they had no other option, they agreed to the alliance. It did not take long for the Catan to prove their near godlike powers to the Necrontyr, with the former being in such awe that they began to worship the Catan as true gods. Where many would willingly offer their souls to the Catan in hopes that they may finally be rid of the Old Ones and see a new era for the galaxy. The Catan showed the Necrontyr how to create destructive weapons and starfleets that would travel among the vast expanse of space within seconds. Soon enough, the Necrontyr called for war against the Old Ones, but the Catan simply replied that they were not yet ready. For now, in a show of good faith, they will grant them the immortality the Catan had promised them, using the very same necrodermis that fashioned the bodies of the star gods. The Necrontyr would soon too be made of living metal, having their souls transferred into these bodies so they may fear no pain, no death. No more would they fear the radiation that plagued them for so many years. Soon they will be immortal. Soon they would be invincible. It is unknown what unspeakable horrors happened within the homeworld of the Necrontyr as they found their souls stripped from their bodies and placed within living metal shells. One by one the Necrontyr marched and were remade into the deathless forms we know of today. The Catan fed on fragments of a race now long gone, for what appeared from these experiments were no longer Necrontyr. They were now known as Necrons. A whole ancient race had undergone a biotransference which ended their living forms, and it wasn't until the Silent King himself awoke in his new body where he saw that a terrible mistake had been made. His people rose again, yes, and they no longer felt the strains of mortal life, but all sense of emotion and individuality had been lost. Their souls now but fragments of what they once were, as the Catan fed upon them. Only the strongest of willed Necrons managed to keep some sort of frame of mind of what they once were, but still they had traded the curse of a short lifespan for the curse of servitude. Now was the time to strike, said the Catan to the Silent King. The Catan had upheld their end of the bargain, and now the Necrons must do the same. Legions of Necron warriors followed the Catan across the stars, as whole systems would be sieged and destroyed. Hundreds of worlds lay barren as the Catan fed upon all the energies there, getting ever stronger in a bid to destroy the Old Ones. With the aid of the Catan, the Necrons managed to gain knowledge of the webway, taking the Old Ones' best advantage away from them. As the deathless forces marched and many worlds were destroyed, the Old Ones sought allies, even creating some races that we know of today in a bid to slow down the Necron and Catan advance. This advance slowed down as the Catan, in their greed, began to fight among themselves, but ultimately they needed to unite, as the Old Ones created many new psychic races, whose mastery over the warp did considerable damage to the Catan and the Necrons. Unknown to the Catan, the Silent King had never truly wished to serve, but instead was biding his time. He waited for the Catan to be vulnerable in an effort to save his now almost mindless people. And that time came as the Catan unleashed many horrors from the Immaterium, where many shapeless monstrosities within the warp now took form and breached into reality, throwing both the Old Ones and the Catan into disarray. The Catan quickly regrouped and relaunched their offensive as the very fabric of reality was now permanently torn. The Old Ones vanished without a trace during this event, and the Catan were victorious, but had no time to celebrate. For the Silent King, in his hatred, commanded his subjects to attack the Catan as necrodermis weapons turned towards the Star Gods, shattering them into fragments of what they once were. These fragments, or shards as they are commonly known, were still powerful, yes, but significantly weaker, and now could be trapped. Bound to the mighty Tesseract labyrinths of the Necrons, the Catan were no longer masters but slaves. The Necrons were now free and a universe awaited them. Despite their victories, the Silent King believed that now was not the time for the Necron to control the galaxy. The horrors that the Catan had unleashed still swept over many planets, and many other races still fought on. But this was not their war, and until the time was right, the Necrons would rest under his command. For 60 million years they would slumber, as the many races of the galaxy destroyed themselves. Then and only then would they rise again, ready to destroy any who remained, and to rebuild the galaxy in their own terrible image. The legions of the Necrons followed their respective dynasties to barren worlds, tomb worlds as many call them, so that their slumber would not be disturbed, and so began the Great Sleep. It is unknown how many tomb worlds exist, for many have indeed been destroyed through malfunction among other means. But soon enough, as if it were a blink of an eye, 60 million standard years had passed, and slowly the tomb worlds began to awake. It is a process that can take decades, sometimes centuries, and in truth, they did not awake in unison as had been planned, but as the years progressed, more and more of these barren worlds awoke with mechanical life. And while the galaxy had seen much strife since they had slumbered, and many new threats and races now travel among the stars, the Necrons stand once again to take control of the galaxy, which in their mind rightfully belongs to them. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our lore video. This is my first official take on Warhammer 40k lore. I know you guys have been asking for it for a while, and I do apologize for not really getting into this sooner. As you guys can imagine, doing all the fantasy lore, and then the guides, and then the battle reports, it takes a lot of time into it. And I more or less want to actually do these videos at least once a week for 40k lore, because I do have a lot of fun with it. The lore is awesome, so hopefully I can cover it a little bit more. If you guys have any thoughts or critiques and stuff, let me know in the comments below. Should I make the videos longer, or do you like this smaller episodic style, which is early history, going into later history, and so on? It's really up to you guys, because I'm cool with either way, and I'd like to see what you guys think about the matter. But other than that, if you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Your support really does mean the world to me, and I shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.